Hey, what's up? This is Michael from League of Items. I'm also Michael MCC29 on DraftKings. And in this video, I'm going to go through some of the results that we've seen recently, specifically the two-game slate last night, which I tied for second place with like a 60-person chop, which is horrible. Great, but horrible. Been pretty unlucky recently, but, that's how it is. I've been playing DraftKings DFS for esports for like 4 years, 5 years, something like that. Before the whole coronavirus thing happened, I was probably one of the higher volume players. And right when coronavirus happened, I won a tournament or two right before they started getting huge. And I know a lot of people are talking about why are the new people winning all these tournaments and everything. I think a lot of that has to do with bankroll. But they're also very good at DFS, which is something that I kind of didn't really take into full consideration. I think that the fact that they had so much data available to them from history of the different slates gave them not an edge, but it cut down the amount of time that it took them to learn how to play League of Legends DFS. I think that one of the things that we're going to see soon is DraftKings changing up the pricing, changing up the stacking requirements, because it's very clear that 4-3 stacking and 3-4 stacking is the highest equity play. I've been doing that for years. A lot of people haven't been doing that for years. I think that's why I took down so many tournaments this year before the coronavirus. So before we go much further, this is my Twitter handle, OGLawDFS. It used to be something else, but I changed it, at League of Items. I'm going to post the link in the description to this video. Whenever I'm watching League, I try to throw out some tweets now. If you ever want to go back and forth about your own lineups or, get my opinions on a slate and you haven't had the time to watch a video, just feel free to go there and talk to me directly. I'm pretty responsive. So yeah, let's go to last night's slate. So we're going to do a few things here. I'm going to review my best lineup, the winning lineup, and I'm going to go through a spreadsheet that has some information about all this, which I kind of created on my own. It is a lot of information to take in, but if you make it a part of your process, it's going to be very helpful in the long run. So last night, the $10 tournament was the main tournament I played in. I don't have a huge bankroll to play with. Like I'm not out here playing $1,500 a day. I've tried doing that. I had a little success in the beginning, then I started losing. You got to have whatever's best for you. You need to know how to manage your own bankroll. If I bank one of these tournaments, maybe I give it another shot. But until then, I'm probably going to run out like 10, 20 lineups in the Titans Fury, and then hopefully 20 in the 10 entry the 20 entry max. That's a good tournament. Yeah, so that's that. In these tournaments, one thing you see is about 50% of the money goes to the top 10 positions, and like between 20 to 30%, 25 to 35%, no, probably 20 to 25% goes to first place. So you really want to get first place alone. It's a little tricky figuring out like when is it a good time to pivot off of a play and how do I give myself higher upside because of how highly correlated everybody is. If you have any questions about that specifically, I'll go into that in a different video. But for this, I'm just going to, go straight into the lineups. So my best lineup was a 3-4 stack from LGD and EDG. So last night, LGD was playing against EDG. If LGD won that series, they would have... if LGD should have won that series, in my opinion. Just watching it last night, they dominated game 1. Game 2, they had a pretty big lead, and then they just threw it away, which was kind of wild. EDG is a pretty good team, but they're not significantly better than LGD. LGD has been underperforming all year, and going into last night's slate, I expected the LGD EDG series to be the higher scoring series, and I haven't looked at what the scores were comparatively between the two sides, but it was probably pretty close. Obviously, you're always looking for a team that 2-0s because you get that bonus, which really increases the upside of your lineups. As you can tell, I came in second with like 60 other people by about 1.7 points. So I had Leon, who is the jungler for IG. He is one of the reasons why IG is a lower kill team in general, in my opinion. He's changed a lot when he's come back. Since he's come back, I think they've won every single series that he's played in, but they've been scoring less fantasy points. At least the jungle position has been scoring less fantasy points. But because of the lineup construction for last night, in order to get the 2 winning teams into the lineup, you needed to have either jungle, top, or support as your captain. Otherwise, you'd have to incorporate a 3rd team into your lineup, which is what the winning team did. So I'm just going to go through my lineup first. Leon was 7,000. AOD was the second highest top on the slate in terms of pricing. He obviously only scored 49.52. I think just player to player, I think the Shy is obviously a much better player than him, which is why a high percentage of lineups went in that direction. He was a salary saver on the slate, but the Shy had so much higher upside. I think the Shy was a better play last night. Junjia, the jungler for EDG, obviously highly correlated with their own team. And before that second match in the IG series, he was going to outscore Leon, especially if it went to a game 3, just because he had 2 pretty high assist games. Leon went crazy in game 2. He had like 9 kills, I think, or something like that. It was a tremendous game, but he hasn't really done much of that recently. So it was kind of a low percentage outcome for him to come back in that way, which changed up the winning lineup. So then I had Rookie from IG and I had Hope from EDG. One thing I'm doing a little bit more now is picking 1 carry from each team in my stacks. I think the highest equity play on a slate where you have at least one underdog like upset and win is to have a 4-3 stack with an 80 carry or a mid laner, because typically mid laners and ADCs are going to have the highest scoring outcomes on a slate. One thing that that lineup construction generally has is a mid laner or an 80 carry from the winning team in the captain spot and in the normal slot on the roster, and then you have a mid or 80 carry from the second stack that you're using. When you're doing a jungler lineup or a top lineup, I'm sure most people are going the route of having like Leon with Rookie and Puff. But so like Puff last night was very highly owned, disappointed a lot of people because he didn't play like out of his mind. But Leon and Rookie just went out of control. So there's not much you can really do in that situation. But when I was building my lineups, I thought to myself, if EDG and IG both win their series and like there's a decent amount of separation between the mid and 80 carry, then I want to have lineups that are potentially unique by rotating them in. And I thought that this was going to be a good lineup that was relatively unique, but apparently so did 60 other people. So that's unlucky. Then I had Southwind with IG. The support position, you really need to have it on a team that 2-0s in these LPL slates, because in a 3-game set where a support loses, that game is going to be horrible. Most of the time it's going to be horrible. Points for fantasy losers are generally very low. And then EDG versus LGD. EDG was the better choice, but in order to get from my lineup to the winning lineup, you needed to save some salary in that position and redistribute it to your captain and 80 carry positions. So like I had a ton of Kramer last night. I don't think I was ever going to get to this kind of lineup construction just because it's not the highest equity kind of build, and I don't like running these kinds of things where you have 2 players from EDG, 3 players from IG, and then Kramer plus LGD. It's a good lineup from the results perspective right now, because like, yeah, he took down this tournament, but how often is the winning lineup going to have players who went 1-2 in a 2-game slate? Maybe it's easier to justify. Personally, I don't like it. Yeah, so that's that. Just real quick, like I said, Puff was the highest owned player on the slate. Let me see if I can move over a little bit. So this is the if you ever want to take a deeper look into the results from a previous day, just download the CSV file from DraftKings. You can do it right here. It helps a lot. It helps you learn a lot. And that's, like I said, that's one of the reasons why I think the DFS professionals like Osimo were able to do a lot of the catch-up work by running old contests against their database. I don't know if they did that, but they should have, and they probably did. They seem like smart guys. So if you look, you have IG, EDG, IG, EDG, IG, EDG, IG. Just, they were so heavily owned because they're huge favorites. And I honestly believe that LGD, if you look at the betting line from last night, they were the exact same. So IG was supposed to beat OMG like a huge percentage of the time, and EDG was supposed to beat LGD a huge percentage of the time. But I think the reason the lines were set the way that they were is because they know that the public perception is, oh, the team with the better record is going to win so much more often. And you see that in a lot of these lines, like even for tonight, you see like these huge lines, like 5,000 to 1,000. It's just crazy. And in a three game series, it's more justifiable. But in one game, it's like, I don't think you could ever justify putting somebody at odds that are better than like 70 to 80%, just because so many teams have trouble drafting and having a cohesive game plan, which is, it's funny and like just bad. But that's part of what happens in a sport that is so young. There's a lot of learning going on, and just there aren't many teams that seem process oriented right now. I know I've talked to a couple coaches, professional coaches, because I've done a little bit of like item analysis and stuff like that in the past. And I've talked to like the head coach of, I think he's with Schalke right now, when he used to be the head coach of Fnatic going into Worlds. I talked to him at one point, and then that was Dylan Falco, and then like Weldon Green, I've talked to him before about items. But yeah, there's a lot of room for growth in League of Legends professional scene, and it's going to make it easier to predict betting, but that's a separate conversation. All right, so here is my results spreadsheet. I had to plug a couple things in. So basically, I put all the top laners in this column: jungle, mid, AD carry, support, and team. And then it looks up the values from like a separate table that's usually over here, but you can't see it right now because there's filters on all the data. So basically, this will take... You could use this sheet probably two different ways. You could either plug in results and it'll just give this to you, or you could plug in the salaries and the average fantasy points that they typically score, or your projection, and it would spit out what lineups it expects to do the best within the salary constraint. And this doesn't give you every possible combination of players, but this does give you every 4-3 stack and 3-4 stack that's possible within the salary constraint. And the way that we do that is by filtering out right here. So obviously there are like theoretically some extremely expensive teams that you could do, like 51,700. But we're not interested in those lineups because they're not possible to make in the game anyways. So I think the interesting thing to realize is that there were a lot of potential combinations of teams that would have beaten the winner last night. So TL Bennett, congrats to him. Good lineup. It was an interesting way to get here. But even by doing the 3-4 or 4-3 stacking, we could have created a team that would have beaten him. So let's take a look at what those look like. So the first potential winning lineup was a jungle stack 3-4. So even though he won with that, there was a better possible lineup out there. So if you put Leon, Aodi, Junjia, Rookie, Hope, Southwind, and EDG into a lineup, you would have scored 648 points. So you would have won by 42 points. Based off of my numbers, there were 11 teams that could have beaten him last night through normal stacking. You have a jungle lineup, 80 carry, 2 supports, support, mid, 80 carry, 80 carry. And this isn't what I expected to see. I figured that, the top lineups right here would be predominantly jungle, because those were the players who had like that really high upside yesterday. But yeah, it just goes to show you that there are a lot of different combinations. I wonder why I probably didn't get to these because they required you to have AOD instead of the Shy, and I liked the Shy a lot more, which is probably why I wasn't seeing these kinds of rosters last night. Let's see. The best 80 carry lineup was a 3-4 stack with Hope from EDG, AOD from EDG, and Junjia. And then the rest of it was stacked up with LGD. So I guess, is that a possible lineup? Oh, okay. So you couldn't have that lineup because that was all from the same game. So this one, that's the one trouble with this, is that you need to be able to identify stuff like that. So that wasn't a possible lineup either. So we only had 10 lineups, I think, that could have theoretically beaten first place last night. But yeah, so basically that's that sheet. If I had some like specific questions, or if somebody wanted to say like what is this lineup combination look like last night, or how many theoretical lineup combinations were there last night, I would be able to let them know that pretty quick. So according to my numbers, based off of the stacking rules that most people use, there were 625 potential combinations, which helps explain why there are so many duplicates. But it doesn't help explain why nobody was on this. I guess it's because I don't know. I really can't think of a good reason. So let's see. This lineup looks like a huge miss by everybody. 49,900. This one I should have saw. I definitely should have saw that one last night. So that's my bad. Okay. So like I said, I'm just making this part of the video so that you know some of the resources that I have. If you want to take a look at the sheet or something, maybe we can figure something out. I've put a lot of time and effort into this sheet, so I'm not going to give it away for free. But if you have some questions for me, I can go through that. All right, so now let's get into tomorrow's slate. I use BetDSI for all of my esports lines. They seem to be pretty good in general. I think that they're like in the Caribbean or something, so they've had lines for a long time. A lot of these sports books are just getting into it. Their lines are a little softer. And there's some interesting stuff on here that you can take a look at. There's some prop bets that help you determine some different things about how the matches might go, or what the handicappers, how the handicappers think the matches are going to go. One thing to keep in mind is that money lines basically tell you what % of the time you would need to win in order for the bet to be equitable. So for a plus 300 line, they're saying that Dominus is going to win this 25% of the time. This is a good way to figure out, can I find an edge on a given slate? So I think most people are going to think of this matchup in a similar way, where it's 75-25. Actually, there's a huge vig on this line because that's minus 455. So it's really over 5 points that the book is trying to compensate for. I'd be interested to look at more numbers about betting because I couldn't see sports books taking much money on underdogs. So that means that the favorites are not offering good value, which is not surprising to me at all. If you want to compare it to a traditional sport, I would say it's probably useful to compare it to the NFL. Like every week there are some huge upsets that people don't realize. The sports books know that going in. So when they set a line, they're not thinking to themselves, "Oh, the Patriots are going to beat the Dolphins 99% of the time. Let's put out that line," because they know that that's not reality. The reality is that the Patriots will win between probably 70 to 80% of the time, which is still an incredible win percentage. It's just people, the common bettor doesn't understand it like that. So Dominus versus Longzhu. Actually, I'm not sure if it's Longzhu or LNG. I think Longzhu is from Korea. This might just be LNG Esports. So as big favorites, let's see. Flandre versus Natural. Flandre is a very good player. He has the advantage there. XX versus Xiaopeng. Actually, let's make sure that we have the right lineups for tonight. The guy that I use, which everyone else apparently uses now too, is Kenzie. So he posts all the lineups. So let's go to this matchup. Flandre, XX, Maple, Asura, and Iwandi. So that one, he doesn't start normally. Duan's normally the starter for them. This tells me that Longzhu, or LNG Esports, I'll just call them LNG Esports, they are not afraid of DMO because they're switching out their support. And people who aren't familiar with League of Legends might think, it's just 1 out of 5 players, not a big deal. But knowing what I know about most teams is that the support is a very important part of determining how the game is played out, like what part of the map are we going to attack, making sure that everyone's focused on the objectives that they need to take down. So I think that DMO has a chance to win at least one match in this series, which makes it less profitable to roster LNG. I think obviously they could win either way because they do have a talent disparity between the two teams, but I wouldn't be surprised if DMO won like the first game. So maybe you should take a look at a first game line and see what you can get. Because the other thing is DMO is blue side. And here's a little tip for all the esports players out there. Blue side traditionally has a higher win percentage than red side. So when you take a look at DraftKings, the team on the top is the blue side and the team on the bottom is the red side. I'm not sure if it's definitely like that in the LPL or the LCK, but I know for a fact that's how it is in LCS. Because the way that their schedules come out shows you which side is going to be blue and which side is going to be red. So if you want to bet on an underdog, underdogs on blue side perform better historically than on the red side. I don't have any statistics to back that up, but it makes sense in my brain. So maybe I should go into that a little more before people start just making bets on blue side teams. But so the way that the draft works is that you ban out in League of Legends, there's like 150 champions, and each team consists of 5 champions, which I'm sure you're familiar with now. So the blue team will ban out 3 champions, red team will ban out 3 champions, and then blue side gets the first pick. So just think of, gym class. You get the first chance to pick the best champion in the game. That's a huge advantage. The way that League of Legends tries to compensate for that is by giving the next 2 picks to the red team and the last pick of the match to the red team. But even with all that information, historically blue side is like, I think it's like 55%, a 55% win percentage. So if you took the team names off and just did, blue side versus red side, I'm pretty sure that blue side has like a 55% win rate. And that's even more frustrating when you watch some of these matches and you see how bad some of these teams are, like losing on blue side. It's like chess. Like white is supposed to win more often than black. So if you always bet on the white, the player using the white pieces, like you're supposed to win more than the other side. Okay, back into the games. So Flandre, XX, Maple, Asura, and Iwandi or Elwandi. I'm not sure which one it is. Doesn't really matter. You might be able to get some unique lineup constructions using Iwandi because of that 200 salary difference. That's something that you should always take a look at when like the second or when the first substitute or second substitute comes in. There's upside there. However, with LNG, they're not out here trying to lose the series. So if they lose the first game, I'm almost positive they would sub Dwan back in. So if I was stacking LNG, I would avoid the support position unless I needed it. I think that's good advice. All right, let's go game 2. E-Star versus Vici. E-Star is, a very hot team right now. People love E-Star. They've been winning a ton of their matches. I think they're in first or second place. They've only lost one set. Yeah, they're very good. If you take a look at the line, they're expected to win about between 75 to 80% of the time, and Vici is supposed to win under 30% of the time. So again, in a 3-game set, I think E-Star will win. I think E-Star will win the set, but Vici, for people who aren't familiar, Vici Gaming has one of the best head coaches in the world. So Kumo is their head coach. He was on SKT, and SKT rebranded to T1. So the most popular and best team in Korea, which is this team. They had this guy Kumo as their coach when they were the best team in the world, and they were the best team in the world for several years. Everybody gave most of the credit to Faker because Faker plays like the like one of the showier positions. So think like running back or wide receiver. Like they look good because their team puts them in situations that make them look good. And Kumo is not the kind of coach who's going to get beat in a draft for the most part. He has his players trained, how to play very well. So Vici Gaming is a young team. They've been playing a little bit better recently. And I haven't looked at the numbers behind this, but I would be interested in looking historically, what kind of, how many deaths does a Vici Gaming team have, or a Kumo coached team have? Because there are two ways to look at it. If you're behind, you should either wait until a certain part of the game where you know that you can come back by scaling, which is like a League of Legends specific kind of thing that isn't going to make sense unless you like want to learn about it. Let me know and I'll make a different video about the actual game League of Legends. So let's just go through the lineups then. Okay, Xiaobai, Wei, Cryan, Wink, and Xiao Si. So Cube. Alright. So what is it? Okay. He's the normal top laner, normal jungler, mid laner, ADC, and support. So they're playing this straight up. I think a team like E-Star, they probably feel like they have a lot to prove. They're not going to start subbing out players when they're this hot. So I think they're at a lower risk if you roster players from E-Star. I think they're the most expensive players almost across the board, but their team is a little bit less in salary. So one thing that you probably want to look at is doing a 3-4 where the captain comes from one of your other teams, and then E-Star is 3 players plus the team. Just getting back into this though, for Vici, it's Cube, AX, Forge, iBoy, and Hang. So Vici runs 2 junglers, AX and Chieftain. They have 2 mid laners, Forge and Zika, and then they have 2 supports. So there is some substitute risk if they lose the first or second game. If they lose the first game, because if they lose the first game, they're probably going to lose the second game. And if they win the first game, they're just going to run out the same roster. So, the only real downside is if they sub somebody out from a loss in the first game. I think my favorite play from E-Star, I don't know, this is the kind of thing where it's going to come down to roster construction, because E-Star is going to be so popular just because they've been performing so well. So if I'm not looking at it from that perspective, if I think about just how the game might play out, I know that Vici is a team that wants to put iBoy in a situation to win. So I think that it increases the chance they're going to target bot lane. So you might be better off playing Cryan and Wei as the 2 important players from this team. If you can get Wink in there, obviously try to do it. That'll be great, especially if they 2-0. But I would give a slight edge to Cryan over Wink. And I'm normally the kind of guy that prefers 80 carries, because if you've ever played League of Legends, you would understand how much significance is placed on that champion and that player. 80 carries and mid laners are typically the 2 most mechanically skilled players on their team. And then the last game is RNG versus V5. So I love V5. I love the way that they play, because even though they have been losing a lot, they take risks and they try to win by whatever means necessary. And a lot of teams just don't do that. Like, I keep saying that I'm frustrated with the LCS because they just lay down and die. Like, they're not actively looking for ways to get back in the game. They just don't. I really don't think that the organizations understand the system side of things well enough, which that's a separate rant that I'd have to go on. So V5 has been switching up their lineup a lot recently. Last time they tried running Mole top lane, so I think that they like CLX a lot, because he was the backup. He's a substitute, right? And going into the season, they didn't intend on having him play a lot, I don't think. But because of the whole coronavirus situation, I think Xiaohan and Max weren't available. So they were going into the season, they were planning on Allies, Xiaohan, Mole, Y4, and Max. But then a few weeks ago, in some of their matches, you would see CLX playing support, but then they would get into the game and he would be like the mid laner or like a carry. Like, it was weird. So they obviously like him a lot. They believe in that guy, and they might not be able to beat RNG, but Victory 5 is the kind of team where you want to have a little bit of exposure to them for the next week or so, because it just seems like they have to get a win at some point, whether it's like a one game win or a set win. And the other good thing is, since they're so bloody and they continuously go for big plays, if they get a win, they're going to win a tournament for somebody. They can win somebody $50,000. Even as a losing team, they could theoretically be a part of a winning lineup as like a 3-4 stack. Like, maybe you get V5 winning 1 game out of 3, and then one of the other games is also high scoring. Those are the kinds of conditions you're looking for to justify putting V5 in a stack. So let's see, V5 plus 1,000. Like, that is crazy. Like, I don't even know what plus 1,000 probably means, like under 5% or something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure what the conversion is for that one, because I typically don't have to look at lines that are this high. So they're basically saying for every single game, RNG has like a 90% chance to win. And personally, I just don't think that's the case. Like I said, I think that the maximum amount that you should project for a team to win a game is between 70 to 80% maximum. And most games, I don't think you can justify getting there. So maybe you can justify getting there in this situation. This line just moved because somebody bet on V5. I don't know if you saw that, but just keep that in the back of your mind when you're watching tonight, if you decide to watch. So there's the last game of the night. They play at the same time as That's another lineup. So, allies, 4,800, very cheap. Xiaohan is cheap. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Ooh. Wow. So, we're in... oh, wow. We're in another situation where, like, the lineups just are... DraftKings released them too soon, I guess, and they didn't know what was going to happen. So, you can roster a mid laner for a support price. So that means this plus like these two or this or some combination. If you need salary tonight, look at V5. You might want to try that out because you could probably get two very good 80 carries or two very good mid laners that are projected to 2-0, and then throw one of these guys in there. If they sneak a game out, money. I'm definitely going to have exposure to them tonight. That's pretty cool to look at. Okay. And then we're going to start doing the LCK matches. We don't have roster information for these. So that's a little scary to get exposure to these guys. That's why most people have a preference for the LPL because we have more clarity on lineups. So Dragon X versus Sandbox. Sandbox. Yeah, Dragon X should win this one. Like, this is a real mismatch, in my opinion. I probably won't roster any Sandbox because I have no idea who's playing for them, which means they're going to be low owned. So if you have a good feeling about Sandbox, you'll be very different than everyone tonight. Dragon X is the third most expensive team. A lot of their players, their top laner is pretty inexpensive. The top laner is not in a great matchup tonight. Summit is considered one of the best top laners in Korea, even though he's on a losing team. And then On Fleek, he was their starter last year. I don't know what they're doing with their lineup right now. Dragon X. So you have the fifth most expensive, third most expensive, fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth most expensive. And Deft is an amazing player. So you might want to get exposure to Dragon X. They're the fourth, probably on average the fourth most expensive stack. They should 2-0. So I'll probably have exposure to Dragon X. They're probably going to be less expensive or less highly owned than a lot of the Chinese teams as well. So that's a potential way to get a lower owned stack. And the thing is, you got to be a little contrarian when you're playing DraftKings esports because, there's so much hive mind going on where LPL is quote unquote better than than the LCK. And I understand the arguments for those, but that doesn't mean that every single slate you're going to have LPL teams winning. It's just not the case. Like if you look at some of the winning scores for the LCK teams, they're just as high as the Chinese ones. It really comes down more to style. Like there are Korean teams that when they're losing, they're still going to keep pressing for a win. It's really just a style thing. It's a style thing more than a region thing. It's a team style thing more than a team style thing more than a region style thing. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think that people who say LPL is just better than LCK are trying to say that it's the region as a whole, which is not true. It's the best teams from China are higher scoring. That's how I look at it, at least. So then the next one is KT versus Griffin. This line is bad. Griffin should not be that big of an underdog to KT. Griffin has been underperforming this split, but they are still, a pretty good team in general. So I think that Griffin is an underdog that I'd be interested in rostering. KT has been performing really well recently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so they've won their last 6 sets. But that doesn't really impact my decision-making process very much. I will probably not have much KT, and I will probably have Griffin lineups out there. And then the last game is Gen.G versus T1. So these are two of the best teams in Korea. This is going to be a very exciting set. If you want to learn a little bit more about League of Legends, I would suggest watching that matchup tonight. Should be a very good watch. So they're basically saying it's 60-40. And that's not true. This is a coin flip match every time it's played. T1 is like just so good. Like having Faker on your team, you always have a chance to win the series. And they're going to play. They're going to play to win this series because it's important for them to prove that they can beat a team like Gen.G or Dragon X, like the better teams in the league. And if you look, they beat Dragon X 2-0, and Teddy had 100 points. That's kind of what I would expect to see tonight. The other thing is, in this set, even if one of them doesn't 2-0, I could see all three games being very high scoring because of the number of interactions the teams are going to have. Both teams, even if they have a little bit of a bad early game where they're giving up a few kills, they're good enough to trade objectives, stay within a couple thousand gold, and continuously fight around objectives. If I was picking my favorite player from this match, my favorite player right now is Teddy. I would prefer Teddy over Faker because one thing that Faker does, and one of the reasons why he's probably the best League of Legends player ever, is that he's willing to play for his team. So if they're in a draft and they decide, we want to play through the bot lane and let Teddy carry and let Teddy do almost all the damage for our team, Faker will play something like a supportive mid laner. He'll play Karma, or Lulu, or just some weird support champion that people aren't expecting, and help his team carry through that way. Another thing to take into consideration is the way that the meta is going right now, is that teams are picking champions at spike after 1 to 2 items because the importance of Dragon and Rift Herald and taking towers in the early game. And that's part of the reason why you see a lot of Triforce, a lot of the Triforce meta. So I could also see Faker playing something like Varus. That would be very good. Varus would be very good for him for fantasy purposes. Another side note to take into consideration is that T1 lost Clid. Clid was their jungler last season, and he went to Gen.G, so I could see T1 wanting to get revenge against Gen.G for that reason. I mean, I don't think there's any hostility, but obviously you want to make that person regret leaving you, right? So, like I said, I prefer the T1 side on this. I think they're an underdog who should win. I think they should win this set. I'm not going to be overly exposed to them. I don't know if they're going to be my favorite team once I see how the rosters, like the potential lineup constructions, but we'll see later on when we're taking a look at the lineups. All right. Well, this is thanks for watching. Like I said, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm going to try to put up videos every day for every slate. Make sure to follow me on Twitter. Feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer some of your questions. Just let me know what you need, and I'll try to be as informative as possible. I'll make videos for people if they have specific requests, and things like that. Otherwise, good luck out there. If I don't win one of these tournaments soon, I hope you do, but law of averages says I'm due. So, just give me your money. What's the problem? All right. Well, I might post another video later today, but if I don't have a chance to say goodbye until then, goodbye and good luck.